Hey, hi, welcome. Bit of a difficulty with one camera. It seems to have frozen. Go figure, not unusual really. So if you just hang tough with me for a sec while I get it going, yeah, and then we can get started. I apologize. It's funny how that works, especially when you're just going to come into the show. Go figure. But anyway, yeah, there we are. Look at that. Yeah. So, yeah, here we are today. Let's talk politics and the effect on workplace safety. And maybe what we'll do is, let's just turn the music down a bit and we'll get started. And you know, politics, and I'm talking government politics, I'm not talking internal organizational politics. I'm talking government politics. And honestly, it does have an effect. A lot of people would think, well, how does it affect your safety? But it does. It does. Some people don't pay attention to how governmental politics has that effect on workplace safety, but it does. It does have a definite effect, and we're going to talk about it. But first, before we get too far, let's just talk about the chat rules real quick. First and foremost, love your participation, appreciate it all the time. So jump into the chat, introduce yourself, where you're from, what you do. Introductions are awesome. Ask and answer, okay? Your knowledge and opinions count. Not all of us are born with this inherent excellent health and safety and risk management knowledge as we pop out of the womb. So we've had to learn it along the way. So whatever you do, if you want to share opinions and share your knowledge, just be civil about it. No name calling, no insults. A lot of times people are asking a question just because they want an answer. Okay? Now, also, let's keep in mind that during all of this, the Q&A, the talk, the whole works, it's a discussion. It's not considered professional advice. Unless you have entered into a contract with me and there's going to be money exchanging hands, this is not professional advice. All this is collaboration, an opportunity to touch base and compare things. So let's do that. Let's look at that. Let's talk about the effects of politics on workplace health and safety. Now, we are living in an increasing nanny society. At least it seems that way. It seems that every time something happens, whether it be at work or out in the public or whatever, everybody wants to know, where was the government? Where was the government in all of this? And you know what? Sometimes a fair question. But sometimes we also have to understand that we have to be accountable for our own health and safety to a certain extent. So what we want to do here is let's look at both the negatives and positives of government influence on workplace health and safety, as well as leveraging safety within the political narrative in order to achieve one's ends. You know, it's a problem. And it occurs. We can chat about those positives and negatives and the politics and what effect politicians have on health and safety, sometimes for their own motives more so than anything else. And believe it or not, honestly, the results come from both ends of the political spectrum. It may be surprising for you to learn that it doesn't matter whether it's left or right. It occurs from both ends of the political spectrum. And they range from proactive health and safety legislation that protects workers without sacrificing profit and earning potential. Well, sometimes these efforts at leverage and influence sometimes cater to what can be considered as maybe short-sighted perceptions of business and industry. And of course, we're going to have a Q&A and after the chat or after the talk, where you'll have the opportunity. I got 3 questions that have been put to me, maybe a 4th, it depends, I'll see where the mood's going, on it. And then if anybody wants to put anything into the chat or comment section or whatever, by all means, I'll answer that as well. Now, getting on to it, if we've learned anything after the last 2 years, it's that there is always going to be the potential for, the idea of, oh, I'm afraid my safety's in jeopardy, or some government official talking about your safety is in jeopardy and using that fear of lack of safety or your safety being jeopardized to satisfy ulterior political motives. Now, I'm not pointing fingers at anyone. I certainly don't want to dwell on something like the recent protests here in Canada, in Ottawa, where bouncy castles, church services, and pancake breakfasts were perceived as, well, a safety issue. Now, by all means, inconvenient likely is all heck. And that's what we have to do, is we have to understand we need to separate inconvenience from a perceived idea of a jeopardy to safety. We have to learn to separate where our own accountability stops and government intervention is necessary for health and safety. I can't begin to emphasize it enough that there still has to be some personal accountability. And even if we look back at what occurred in Ottawa, you know what, there's going to be years where that's still being settled. And I'm sure that there is going to be political heads that are going to roll. There's going to be politicians thrown under the bus, sacrificial lambs, and so forth. But you know what? I don't want to dwell on that. What we need to understand is that political influence on safety will continue, both positive and negative. What we need to do is understand how we need to react after the effect, and what we can do to continue to propel our own organizational safety cultures forward, and to avoid getting caught up in the political rhetoric and for want of a better term, BS, because that's what can occur. Honestly, it can. We can get wrapped up in it with our own personal opinions and so forth. So let's start with this. Let's look at some recent events and recent things, and by recent I mean over the course of the last few couple of weeks to a couple of years. But maybe the first one is this one here. Now, I'll just bring the headline down for you. BC construction boss was jailed and the company fined $25,000 over repeated workplace safety issues. Now, something of late that's been occurring is, of course, increasing fines for non-compliance, and especially non-compliance where it's putting workers in jeopardy. But the problem is a lot of businesses seem to be treating it as a cost of doing business. And this is illustrated right here when the owner of the company had been ordered to pay more than $43,000 for violations of the Workers' Compensation Act and civil contempt. But obviously that wasn't a deterrent. So what's occurred was, in a recent thing, this person was, and I'm not trying the person in the court of public opinion or anything else, because this is already a fact of record. This is in the news. This is a fact of record. But this person, Dalwinder Singh Kandola, and his company were found in contempt of court. The company was fined $25,000, and he was sentenced to 14 days behind bars. Now, I don't know if that's going to be on weekends or whatever. I have no idea. However, the fact that the judge even found the penalties have had no effect. But what's worse is if you look at what he said, in his defense, Kandola argued that none of his workers have filed WorkSafe BC claims for injuries, and he has paid $5,000 administrative penalty for the 2021 violations. So nobody got hurt. Well, that's great. So you have an excuse to break the law when nobody got hurt. I honestly don't see how that works. I don't see the logic behind that. You are allowed to break the law because nobody's been hurt yet. Yet. That's the thing. Nobody's been hurt yet. Now, of course, the judge rejected that reasoning. Now, the thing is, this is in British Columbia, and British Columbia has some pretty tough laws regarding workers' compensation or WorkSafe BC infractions or OHS infractions. But they are increasing as we go along. And there's been previous cases where company officers have been sentenced or jailed. But usually those where there's been significant injury, disability, like permanent injury and disability, or fatalities. This is the first case where really nothing had happened of consequence and impact, but there's a definite contempt. There's numerous breaches, and obviously, to me, it looked like he was definitely treating it as a cost of doing business. And that becomes the problem. And so that's why the government has stepped in and increased laws and increased penalties. Now, this is a sign of something where it's proactive. Now, as the safety professional, what would you have to do to react to this? You'd have to do absolutely nothing. In fact, what it would do is it would likely iron home a point or drive home a point that you've been trying to make for years, is that there is consequences to ignoring health and safety legislation. So is this a positive? Yes, this is. This is a positive move, and it is something that's needed to be done by all means. Now, another case, though, where, you know what? It's questionable. Far be it from me to question anyone's integrity, but I remember a few years back, and I never saved the tweet. I got a tweet over my feed when I followed this fellow, Naheed Nenshi, regarding, I was following him because I was new to Calgary and I wanted to follow the mayor and just keep up with current politics, and it made sense to me. But part of the problem was when Uber was trying to make inroads into Calgary, and then she was on about the fact that they weren't safe. And really and truthfully, from the outside looking in, to me, what it was is he was trying to protect the existing taxi monopoly that was here. And far be it from me, he never said either way, and it's pretty hard to guess what's going on in a person's head. But he said without adequate insurance or regulations to protect public safety. And insurance is mentioned quite a bit through what he said. And in fact, I got a tweet, and I really wish I had a screenshot it and kept it, because I also responded to him. And he said that the public safety is put in jeopardy because Uber does not have the same insurance. Really and truthfully, we have to understand one thing. Insurance is evidence that you have insurance and that you've done some sort of risk management and risk analysis, and you understand that you have to cover potential losses. I mean, that's what insurance is. It's nothing more. In fact, sometimes with bylaws or other regulations, you're required to have insurance to satisfy permitting requirements. And that's reasonable. Often what it is so that there's the idea of subrogation. The government isn't going to have to step in and deal with anything. But realistically, insurance doesn't qualify as safety. Now, there's another interesting piece to this is about a year later, and I can, if anybody wants, I can put links to these articles in the chat, in the description later on, if anybody asks for them. But Nenshi chose to, after he had a bit of a problem being caught being recorded, calling the Uber CEO some choice words, he did stipulate something that did spark of a safety issue. And that safety issue is the background screening process, because in many large metropolitan centers, as a point of risk management, what will happen is all those taxi drivers, in order to meet livery or chauffeur requirements, will have to undergo a background screening process where there's a criminal record check. Some municipalities require it repeatedly, others are very lax on it. It's all over the map. And realistically, what it is a snapshot at that time. And a snapshot is that there was no crimes committed at that point. And there's been several people undergo background criminal background checks, background criminal record checks, and have committed crimes afterwards. So what it is it's a snapshot at that time. And if they're repeated annually, then realistically, that's a good risk management process. That's a good proactive safety process. So starting off, and it's no secret, and then she was extremely left-leaning. So starting off, it was more what sparked of protectionism versus actual reality as far as what was required for safety. However, in changing the tactic and being a bit different in the approach, talking about the background screening process, hey, does that set up any red flags for safety? Absolutely not. That looks like due diligence to me. That has good due diligence behind it. So once again, if you're going to get on the soapbox as a politician and talk about something as far as safety goes, then you know what? Make sure that you have a bona fide safety concern, because what happens is, it honestly looks like you're either virtue signaling or exercising some sort of favoritism or protectionism. And now, I mean, realistically, with the latest thing with Bill C-11, in fact, I wish I'd recorded it. I saw it on Twitter and I could not go back and find it again. Our leader here, what's his name again? Yeah, that guy. Yeah. Anyway, he was talking about how we need to be concerned with the public safety and disinformation as part of Bill C-11. And realistically, there's nothing to do with safety. So once again, lose that tactic. I wish I could have found it. Possibly he was still talking about gun control, but he happened to be talking about Bill C-11 in the same sentence. So who knows? Don't know. But realistically, once again, don't try to sell something as part of safety. Now, another case to talk about, and this comes from a right-leaning bunch, is our UCP government here in Alberta. At tail end of last year, beginning of this year, made another bit of a change to the occupational health and safety legislation. Funny thing is, in Alberta, it pretty much remained untouched for 4 decades. And the NDP, left-leaning bunch, had got into power, and they made some sweeping changes. A lot of them very good, some of them very cumbersome. And then the UCP's pledge when they got in was to try and undo some of this bureaucracy. Whenever I see that happen, it's always a bad thing, because what happens is it works as an undoing to turn it back to what it was before. And believe you me, something that was written and enacted in the 70s needed to be overhauled. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. So, well, here, let's just bring up the browser and I can show you what I'm talking about. So, when they brought out the changes late last year, earlier this year, one of the things that Jason Copping was talking about was the new rules would reduce administrative burdens for job creators, uphold workers' rights to participate in workplace health and safety, and support a consistent health and safety culture. And you know what? In some of the cases, it's absolutely working. Huge emphasis on workers' three rights, a huge emphasis on the training of health and safety committees to ensure that the workers' three rights are emphasized. And if you don't remember, here in Canada, the workers have three inherent rights. They have the right to know about the hazards associated with the tasks that they're performing and the jobs that they're doing. They have the right to meaningful participation in the health and safety activities and initiatives of the workplace. And they have the right to refuse dangerous or sometimes called unsafe work, depending on the jurisdiction, where the nature of the work would pose an undue jeopardy to their health and safety and well-being. So by all means, yes, they've made some good changes. However, one of the, in my opinion, the backward steps was, rather than be required for each worksite, committees and representatives will be required for each employer, regardless of how many worksites the employer operates. For example, a school division will require only one committee rather than having a committee at each school in the division. And I can see some points with that. I really can. And let's look at the statement. We have heard that the current rules around health and safety committees are not working. The new rules for health and safety committees will support healthy and safe workplaces while reducing administrative burdens. Employers are still responsible for ensuring healthy and safe work sites, and the new rules provide the flexibility to meet the unique needs of each workplace. Now, by all means, makes really good sense first blush. But here's the question. Here's the question you have to ask yourself. What were the dynamics? What was it he was talking about? Was this industry saying, and did they have demonstrable cases that they brought forward? I think if there was some example shared or something, that might have made a difference. But really and truthfully, the whole process went for a few years without being considered, well, it might have been considered overly cumbersome by some, because, you know, after all, change is hard, and if we don't make an effort at the change will never occur and will never get enacted. And so you often wonder, was this just due to perceptions by industry and business? And was this catering to business? I'm sorry, suspicious minds have to ask those questions. And a lot of times when I teach health and safety committees how to be health and safety committees, or members how to be members of a health and safety committee, I will often ask the question, how many of you have different committees at the different work sites within your organization? And still many will put up their hands. And I always encourage them, you know what, it's not required in the legislation currently in Alberta. However, it's a best practice. If you can keep doing it, do it. And here's one of the reasons. Let's say that the organization has several work sites with large amounts of workers on those work sites. And the Health and Safety Committee meets. And they're given 1 hour of leave or whatever, let's say even say 1.5 hours. And they've got maybe 1,000 workers that work for them spread over 5 sites, anywhere from 100 plus workers at each site. Now, how well do you think a representative at each site coming to a committee meeting remotely or driving or whatever the case may be would be effective? How would that be an effective process to examine the safety concerns? If you're running a really tight health and safety ship and you have a phenomenal health and safety culture with very proactive employees, and nothing is occurring as a result, and everything is running smoothly, you know what, I suppose. But that's a utopia. I've yet to see it. So the question is, did you take away from doing this in favor of the influence from external big business? I don't question, and far be it from me to question anyone's motives behind anything, but if there could be some demonstrable examples, like Acme Co., and forgive me if there's an Acme Co. in Alberta, but Acme Co. has 2,000 workers spread over 10 sites, and they found it so difficult to gather each committee together. They were losing X amount of dollars, taking workers off the floor, etc. Even then, was there any exploration of efficiency or any other efforts or any of that behind it? if you'd have stuck to your guns and said, look, we can provide you with some efficiency experts. And so that's the question. Was there any effort made towards this? I don't know. I just see it as a step in the wrong direction. That's my personal opinion. If I went to work for an organization and they said, we were doing it, we found it problematic, and this is what we're doing, I think if I had spare time to devote to it in my work, I would likely see if I could figure out a way to revert back to a health and safety committee at each work site and how I could coordinate everything and see if it would work. Because my experience previously was I had I worked in a jurisdiction where it was a requirement if there's 20 more workers at any work site, and they were required to have a health and safety committee. And you know what? I was very thankful because being the only health and safety professional with other external duties to do on top of health and safety, you know what? It helped to run everything and run a tight safety ship, shall we say. Anyway, that's that at the moment. I don't have, people are coming and going, so I don't have really any questions in the chat. So what I think I'll do is I'll jump into the first question that was brought up. And Saifuldin Morale sent me some more questions. And awesome. Thank you, Saifuldin. Keep bringing them in. It's awesome. Before that, of course, if anybody has any thoughts, if you watch the stream afterwards or think of a question that you want to leave, by all means, leave a comment. And I appreciate your opinions. Poke that like button. Something as well, I recently did a video on Bill C-11 in Canada. So it might jeopardize the health of this health and safety channel because of the favoring of Canadian content, and I'm not going to go to the work of applying to get CanCon certified. So I don't know what's going to happen. So I appreciate all of the interaction I do get. But anyway, Saifuldin's first question. He says, can you explain the difference between risk assessment and risk management? It's actually the third question he asked, but I brought it to the forefront of the first question because it'll help me answer possibly the other two. So first off, number one, sometimes both are treated as a noun more than a verb. For instance, you'll have risk management division in an organization or the risk management department, and they're looked at as a noun versus more about what they do, or it's thought they're there so they manage risk. And same thing as risk assessment. Somebody will hold up a piece of paper and say, here's my risk assessment, versus risk assessment being the verb in action. But the easiest answer for it is this. We can only manage what we can measure. And that's the truth. We can't manage anything if we haven't measured it. And it doesn't really matter what it is. So the same thing works with risk. Now, the idea of a risk assessment is that you're looking at the situation, whether it be jobs and duties that a person's doing, a new project, an existing project, a new initiative, change management, whatever the case may be. And what you're going to do is you're going to analyze and you're going to look for all of the probable consequences that could occur and their probable severity, and of course the probability that they're going to occur, to consider the whole impact on the organization. This is that calculating of risk. Then once that whole process is done, then you can look at the controls that you would use to manage that risk, implementing those controls. In doing so, the most effective way to manage that risk is to reassess and manage it and see how you're lowering that risk, and then to have an ongoing timeline to it. So that, because risk management shouldn't be a one and done, it should be an ongoing process. So risk assessment is measuring for risk. Risk management is managing or controlling, and then continuous observation and review of that risk management to ensure that it's going on correctly. I hope that answers that question. And if it didn't, by all means, somebody please. Leave me a comment. I'd appreciate it. Now, the next question that Saifuldin brought up is this. Can I explain the difference between corrective actions versus preventive actions in the way of risk? And you know what? That's an awesome question. And realistically, let's put it back into the risk management idea, but it's also same thing within safe work practice at work and incident investigation, work site inspections, or the ongoing hazard assessment process at work. The idea is when you initially assess something for its inherent risk, for the probable consequence, for the probable severity, and the probability that it's going to manifest and occur, and then you put some preventive measures in place, these preventive actions. So it could be preventive action is having a new stairway or stairwell and then putting a guardrail down the stairwell. And then what that is it's some fall protection and a preventive action, some fall prevention, if you will. But somebody falls down the stairs, and people are repeatedly falling down the stairs, but we've found that the stairs are not being maintained and cleaned well enough. And so now the corrective action with those stairs after the investigation might be that we need a preventive maintenance process in place so that the stairs are cleaned and swept daily or more often to reduce those tripping hazards. So preventive action is something that you're going to do to prevent beforehand. Corrective action is where something has occurred that was not considered or slipped through the cracks and you need to correct it. Once the corrective action is complete, it becomes the preventive action. So it becomes this full circle process, and that's why hazard assessment and risk assessment are not a one and done. They have to be a continuous process. It's not something where you put it up on the shelf and say, hey, pat myself on the back, I'm all done. No, it's not the case. So you have to make sure that hazard assessment, risk assessment are your constant ongoing case of doing business. Peter Drucker, very famous business icon and philosopher, he said that the first order of business is not to maximize profit, but to minimize loss. And sometimes that's the message that gets lost in the course of doing business. Excuse me. The third question, fall protection versus fall prevention. And I think I might have answered that somewhat already. Now, fall protection, and once again, becomes sometimes a noun versus a verb. I've got my harness and my lanyard on, clipped in, everything's fine. And, I've got fall protection on. I'm wearing my fall protection. I'm doing fall protection. So it becomes both this verb and this noun. And realistically, the idea is fall prevention is often these measures that we enact prior to work taking place. So guardrails along a high area, fall protection netting to catch workers as they fall. Toe boards, all of these different things, railing downstairs, all of these are fall prevention. We want to prevent falls. So they're that proactive process that we put into place. Fall protection, on the other hand, sort of encompasses everything, engineering, administrative, and PPE. It's the idea of a holistic process in place to prevent falls while work is taking place. So it's safe work practices written for workers working at heights. It is the engineering controls, the properly engineered anchors and tested anchors. It's all of the equipment in between that anchor and the worker's harness, and the worker being properly trained to put on and use that harness. Or, depending on the situation and the legislation, maybe a restraining belt and travel restraint. Travel restraint and restraining belt is more fall prevention than anything because it restrains that person's travel and they can't get to the edge, versus fall arrest gear is actually more fall protection because if the person does fall, it arrests and stops their fall. And whether they're using an SRL a retractable line, or they're using just a static lanyard, whatever the case may be. So once again, with these terms, all of these terms, what I want to assure you that you do as a safety professional when you're writing your safe work procedures and developing your safe work practices to go into those procedures is look at the vernacular and terminology of both your industry, maybe not both, but your industry, your area of practice, in other words, the geographical area, and the legislation, and make sure that your safe work procedures are using all of that terminology. And especially if you're going to be an international company moving into a different area, find out what those workers call it all. And make sure that you, and I've done it again, I've talked about it before, and maybe what I'll do is I'll leave a link in the description and maybe a card up here, is I've talked about the definitions in your safe work documents, because they're really important. It's important that you define what you're talking about. And keep your inconsistencies consistent. If you're going to be a local organization and you move in and you call it fall prevention and the area, everybody calls it fall protection, make sure that everybody's on the same page. However you do that, whether it's going to be creating definitions or changing your own vernacular to meet the vernacular of where the people are working. My recommendation. Don't really see, nobody's left anything in the chat. So be it. Sorry if you've joined late or anything. Once again, as a quick reminder, leave questions in the comments. Send me a comment. My email address can be found on the main page. You know what? If you appreciated everything, send me a like. Let me know. As I said before too, in a recent video, I have hit, what is it now? Oh yes, 1,000 subscribers. So I appreciate all of you that have taken the time to click that subscribe button and to ding that bell. And when you ding the bell, you get notified of new content. And whenever I put content up, excuse me, you're going to get notified and you won't miss a live stream. I appreciate the opportunity to come on, talk, present some of my thoughts and opinions, and of course, answer questions. But anyway, I haven't received anything else, so rather than belabor this anymore, why don't I bid you adieu? And whoops, I turned off my camera. There we go. Why don't I bid you adieu? And you have a great rest of your day or evening or wherever you're viewing from. And do me a favor. It's all about safety leadership. And to be a safety leader, you have to be a safety influencer. So don't just talk about safety, but and don't just think about it, but actually do it. Be a doer and provoke safety wherever you are. Okay? Take care. Bye for now.